All right. Dr. Jackson, you're around.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I apologize. We're having bad weather here. Seems like that's going on a lot right now along the coast in the south. And so to make sure that I'm not dropping off, I'm just gonna have my audio on. I've already explained to Donald and to Shetta to take on the load, but I wanted to first of all welcome everybody to our PBIM. We're usually try to have this in the early part of the semester, but given items beyond our control in some cases, we've had to put it back a little bit. So we have a full agenda. I just want to point your attention to a couple of things. And Brandy, if you could bring them up, I want to first go over the CWG because I know we have some new members or people that are just colleagues that are out there. If you could bring up the CWG item that I just sent, if not, I can pull it up.
Okay, hold on one second.
I wanted to start off with that because it was something new that we started last year in the PGC. And the question was, well, how do we get things going, Dr. Jackson? How do we move items forward that need attention? And I propose that we establish a chancellor's work group where I would meet with different members of our constituency group. And I wanted to show you who those members are.
Okay,
just
I'm
briefly.
pulling it up. One second.
And then I want to show you one of the things that we did this last year, and I will go down the kind of when it comes up and show you where we established our goals and some of the things that we actually did. So, and this will be posted out there. I didn't get it in time, but it allows, the Brown Act allows that when I present to the public, I also can present to the membership at the same time. So if you can make it just a little bigger for my eyes, I don't know about anybody else's.
I'm sure everybody's eyes, but I will attempt to do that.
Okay, if I'm gonna change it myself on my own, but just for those people. So this is the membership. And I wanted to point out the Chancellor's Work Group is not a standing committee. It's task oriented, it's active only when there are specific tasks to be assigned. These are the membership. This was agreed to and adopted by the PGC. So you can see that again, this is going to be out there. If you could scroll down just a little bit under current responsibilities, because that's the thing that I want to talk about. Okay. So when we met, one of the things that we decided that we wanted to take on to provide input to the whole system, because we have members from each of the subcommittees that are on part of the district-wide, is we wanted to look at our budget philosophy, and we did send that forward, and it was updated, modified, changed, and then we presented the final document to the Board of Trustees. And the Board of Trustees, it was just for first reading. It's not finalized yet, but that is going to be part of our manual. So we wanted to get that out first. The other things that we did was we wanted to look at updating the PBIM structure. And we're going to talk about that some more, but tri-chair was one of the first things. We adopted a tri-chair model, and because of that, Tashetta is part of our tri-chair, lead by example. And so that has happened, I believe, in every committee or is in the process. And then the other one was looking at appointments, and we have a template for that. We'll send it out again. In fact, making it available, I think, during our breakout sessions. And then we wanted to look at how we were going to assess ourselves. You know, if we're going to improve, we need to have some kind of assessment standards. And then these are some of the things that we did. It says this was last updated in, I think, in November. And so we developed a structure for the Holistic Safety and Wellness Committee, name to be determined. That is out there, and I'm not going to go over it, but it is available. And now we're asking individuals that were assigned by either their participation based upon whether they were at a certain college or whether they were on a certain committee, or if they were being appointed by one of our bargaining units or by our senates. All of that is out there and available. And it was adopted on the 25th, March the 25th of this year. So that is a good thing. And then the District Strategic Enrollment Management Committee is going to be looking at a District Enrollment Management Committee, or DIMSI. Hopefully that'll be done today. And then we are continuing on with our Data Integrity Committee, and we'll be getting a report on that later on. So that's what we've been doing with the CWG. And with that, I want to entertain any questions about that. There are a couple of other documents that are there that I provided just as a FYI. One of them is in relation to how we are conducting, each college is conducting compliance with the Assembly Bill on, excuse me, I've got to take a drink of water. The other item that I'm not going to go over is the integrated budget. And because of lack of time, it's out there, it's been presented. It's part of the college's ACCJC report, and it just provides an update of where we are on that. And it may be at a later date, we can go over that document. But again, that is out there for your review. Brandy will add it to our board docs. And I just want to say thank you to all of you that are on the committees for going through the board doc training. We are implementing that. We were using Teams. And if you weren't a member of that team, you really couldn't get access to the documents. So we migrated all of the district-wide committees over to board docs. Some are further along than others, but I just wanted to point that out in my introductory. So Donald, you have a question?
Yes, Chancellor. In our in this Chancellor's work group, I know we have minutes in it, but we also looked at other colleges and districts on our about PBIM, and there was a discussion regarding the structure of our PBIM, and you had given some good comments regarding why we're trying to mirror this with a PGC as opposed to a PBC only, which there were a number of people who were interested in going back to that model that we had. And so since I don't know if anybody has seen those minutes from there, could you elaborate on that point just briefly?
Okay. When we met in the with the Chancellor's work group, really, we wanted to look at our overall district-wide structure. And I've been in, this is my 4th district. So I've seen a lot of different narrations of what that should look like. And the one that I think works the best, from my opinion, is that your governance body, which is the PGC, not your budget, really takes into consideration all of the items. And so I shared with the CWG how a graphic of what that looks like. I also shared it with CM, since Cambridge West is working with us on modifying our manual. And I don't have the diagram here in front of me. I can look for it, but basically it takes it from the college level. So it starts with the college's program review process, with their prioritization process and how they move forward. That then goes up to the college's participatory governance bodies, whether that's, President's Roundtable or College Council, whatever it's called. That's the next level. They endorse those recommendations. Those recommendations are primarily in the area of facilities, human resources, technology, and equipment, because there's sometimes equipment that is necessary. For example, the chillers over at Laney. And then that bubbles up from those groups. It goes to each of those areas within the district-wide committees. And the district-wide committees make recommendations based upon the budget, what they would like to move forward on, because the district has to support that. So that's why it goes through that. It's not I don't like it, so we veto it. It just means that you create some kind of prioritization for us to work on at the district level to support that. And then it goes to the budget. The budget committee looks at it, says, well, we don't have enough money to be able to do this, or we can only do one of these. And so that back and forth between the different committees goes through the budget committee. The budget committee then makes a recommendation, doesn't stop whatever the recommendations are, but they say, this is what we recommend. But say that technology says, we think we should do this. They say there's not enough money in the budget, that still goes forward. So the budget committee doesn't have a veto right. And then it comes to the PGC for final discussion and recommendation to the chancellor. And so that was what we had proposed. And we actually have a diagram of what that looks like, but I don't have it in front of me right now. And we've been working with CM, because I think this also aligns with what he's been telling us, is that our district-wide committees right now are reporting bodies, and they really should be planning and strategic bodies, not just report out what they discussed at their last meeting. So that takes a bit of a change in how we look at things. And so because of that, you have to change your structure. It can't be the same structure. So that's this year. That is the challenge that I see for us, is to make that turn so that we can actually implement this. Because right now we have a resource allocation model, we have a budget philosophy, and we really don't have a real strong structure of how to get from the philosophy to the end result. So I'm trying to stay within my time period, Donald. So that is what we discussed at the Chancellor's Work Group. And if anybody on the committee besides Donald and I want to chime in, please do so.
Yeah, thank you, Chancellor. Could we pull up the agenda if nobody has any questions?
Okay. One moment.
And the other items that I sent, like I said, are just informational items. And I have a couple of more minutes. So let me just bring up something that came up in a meeting that I had yesterday with the District Classified Senate. And one of the things that they recommended, and I really want to bring it to this body for consideration, is they recommended training. They said that there's questions regarding, governance training is what they entitled it. So they were recommending, and I think they were going to move forward with that through Tashetta, to see if we could do something like that, to look at how are we budget? What are our current processes and procedures? What's the role of governance in that process? And it aligns with what we're doing right now. So I wanted to bring it here as maybe something that we could put as part of our goals. I told them I would bring that forward. And then the other thing was that they wanted to know, who votes and who doesn't vote. And it's specifically with the tri-chairs. And my guidance to them was, and if somebody sees it differently, please tell me, but currently the co-chairs have voting. So even though we're making it a tri-chair, logically, it would seem that but all three chairs would have voting rights, and that's what I told them. But they said they couldn't find anything in writing about that. And I said, I think that that goes under the template that we talked about at the CWG, which I'll share at a later date. I'll get it out to everyone. And it was just a template that was a sample, not we have to, mimic it directly, but it gives you a starting place, because I went through this similar process when I was at Chabot Las Positas, and we were doing the same thing we're doing now. How do the district-wide committees fold into, and what is the structure for getting recommendations from the colleges up to the district and then getting it into the budget? And so they have the same structures that we have. They call them something different. So I provided a template, and I believe that Maisha sent that out to everyone when she was still here, because it's in the notes under the CWG. But again, I can send it out again. So that concludes my introduction, and it includes my update on the CWG, unless there are some questions.
All right, hearing none or seeing none, actually. Should we move on to the next topic, which I think is the review of the draft 2022-23 budget? Is Adil here and Dr. Jones here?
I am here, and I think Adil is also here. So, well, I can start then if you'd like.
Oh, I'll stop the share so that you can share your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me. That's fine. Let me pull up something then.
Yeah, and Dr. Jones, if I remember right, for next year's budget, we're also going to be implementing the allocation model at the same time, right? So,
well, I will speak to that in just a moment, Donald.
okay.
So give me 1 second, and so I will share my screen as soon as I find the presentation. Okay. All right, so I will try to go over this quickly. I'm not going to be terribly detailed about it, because I believe that many of you would have already seen this either in one of the campus, even one of the district forums, or at the either of the two board meetings. So where we are with regard to the 2022-23 budget. Last Tuesday, I think, or the 27th of September, the Board of Trustees approved the 22-23 budget. And essentially, there were several key changes from the previous budget to what was approved. One of those changes was an increase in our revenues by $4 million that you see there coming from our HERF funding. The other ones are expense, but I want to also point to the fact that, as you recall, when we provided the adopted budget book, that included an overstatement of our revenues, and we have since corrected that error. And so what our 2022-23 revenues are will be $159.28 million. And remember that this is just our unrestricted general fund revenues. And then, excuse me, we made some other adjustments in the expense budgeting, largely in the personnel line items to reflect a couple of things. One, we were successful in coming up with tentative agreements with all three of our bargaining units through a very, very collaborative process, and that involved a lot of folks working together to accomplish that. And so the expense budget reflects a 6% salary increase for the employee groups. The other thing that we are doing in terms of helping to close that initial gap in terms of the expense budgeting, we are essentially reducing from a budgetary standpoint the budgeted amount for vacant positions. We're doing it in two ways. One is capturing the salary and benefit savings that we have accrued thus far through the first quarter. First quarter represents July 1st through the end of September. And then a select number of positions will be frozen for the remainder of the fiscal year. The exact positions are things that Cabinet is working on finalizing, but it would equate to about $3 million in savings from those vacant positions. And so the overall expense budget would be $159.04 million. And we anticipate that there would be a slight increase to our ending fund balance. And we made presentations to bond rating agencies to indicate that we plan to maintain an ending balance of at least 16%. And as you can see from the 5-year projection, that's what we are in fact seeking to do. So that was what was approved by the Board of Trustees. Now, what are some of the things that we're going to be doing moving forward? So since this has been done, the finance team has begun the work to update the adopted budget book. So all of the pages in the previous book that in some form or fashion had general fund, unrestricted general fund dollars associated with those pages are being updated. And so we will get that updated and bring that back to the board for approval in a future date, either late October or most likely early November at this point. But that's the plan with regard to the 22-23 budget. Now, as the chancellor indicated, and trust me, we did not coordinate this, but a lot of what I'm going to say next aligns with some of the things that you've already heard the chancellor indicate. And that has to do with thinking about where do we go from here in terms of having a resource allocation model that looks largely at how we allocate resources from the district level, and the budget philosophy that is on its first read at the board, and we may get some additional input on that. But then what is the budgetary process that undergirds that? And so that's where we are next in terms of looking at what should that process look like. And so at this point, we are in what I call data gathering mode. So, and I guess it was earlier this week, finance had a focus group with the college presidents to get their input on budgeting, what's working well, what needs to be enhanced, and things like that. So we had a really robust conversation. We are also planning to have a similar focus group for our faculty colleagues to give them a similar opportunity to provide input in terms of what they like, what they've seen at other institutions and the like, for us to think about budgeting. And then similarly for another focus group that's planned for college administrators and classified professionals, so that we can have a rich process of input and ideas coming to us that we will then use in conjunction with looking at and pulling data and information from other multi-college districts in terms of what they do, in terms of some of their processes, so that we can then probably to PGC first is a set of here are some ideas and some recommendations that we may want to consider as ways of doing this. And then once we present information to them and that they think, hey, this makes sense for us, how we want to do budgeting at this district, then it would go through the normal process until it's fully adopted by the shared governance bodies, and then ultimately accepted by the chancellor as our mode of operating going forward, and then incorporated into our 23-24 budget process that will ultimately go to the board. So that's the work that we are doing. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, just to give you a brief look at sort of the kinds of lines of inquiry that we were discussing at the focus group with the presidents, that and we'll be using a similar line of questioning for the other focus groups. Challenges with the existing process. Faculty and staff involvement. How do we maximize faculty and staff involvement in the budgeting process? Okay, FTS target and FTF allocation process. What should that look like? Capacity and acumen of the college business offices. What should their role be, and how can they do that? Clarifying and aligning the budget timeline with the state timeline and the other campus timelines that all need to be coordinated, and the district timelines. Role and support needed from district finance. And the chancellor mentioned about training. Resources and training that is needed in order for us to do this work at a high quality level. And then other comments and feedback. And just as a means of starting the conversation and looking at a model, I pulled one from Los Angeles Community College District. And one of the things that we're looking at and is obvious that needs to be incorporated, needs to be driven by our mission, vision, and values, but also we have to have really robust ways of having the allocation decision being supported by program review or comprehensive reviews and so forth. And so connecting those things into the resource allocation. The other component has to be about how do we assess, whatever our structure is, how do we assess and make sure that we're on an ongoing basis looking at ways to improve the process as well. So these are some of the things that we have done. These are, and also an idea of some of the things that we are working on and planning to do in the very near term future. So I think that I will stop there, and I will see if Adil or any of the presidents that went through the first focus group have any additional thoughts or ideas that they want to share at this time. So thank you.
I'm just gonna add, Dr. Jones, that we are working on the salary frozen. We're gonna try to do a presentation to the Chancellor Executive Cabinet so we can do the revised budget. We need to do that. once the chancellor approved that and everybody agreeing on the frozen position, then we can record those changes into the system so we can start doing the revised budget. Once we do that, they won't take times to do the revised budget. The thing that will take a couple maybe weeks or 10 days is to redo the budget book. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. I appreciate that. Yes, and I agree. We are working on that. Hopefully, that'll be on the agenda for our next Chancellor's Cabinet meeting. That's the goal, at least. So again, thank you very much for that. I don't know whose hands was raised first, Donald, and then I also see Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff could go first.
Hey, Jeff, how are you, sir?
I am wonderful. Thank you very much, sir.
Mhm.
I had a question. I was looking at the PowerPoint or the picture that you showed. I think the second to last one that showed the list of things that you were looking at, changes that you were looking to make, and I'm actually concerned, especially when it comes to your issues around faculty and staff input. And a more cynical person than me would say that it looks like we're kind of rewriting shared governance out of this process altogether. There's a lot of spaces in which, like you mentioned, faculty and staff, where my inclination was to say, this seems like it's a job for the planning and budget committee at the district level before it goes to PGC. And if we're gonna bypass that, I find that a little problematic. But if we're not, I just be happy to have an explanation.
My intent is not to bypass any of our shared governance bodies. What this is intended is to have focus groups, candid conversation, to hear from folks, to inform potential structures and recommendation on how we are going to do the budgeting at the detailed level. So it's opportunities for folks to share their thoughts and ideas, but by no means bypass it. But I want to be informed as to what folks think might be a good way for us to do this work before providing something to our shared governance bodies that people would absolutely think is horrible, because we haven't even at least touched base with them in the initial process of developing the ideas. And so this is really intended to hear from folks before we even begin thinking about what might be a structure that could make sense and support the district very well.
Okay. I just want to just follow up really quickly. My issue was that I'm thinking of all my colleagues that aren't necessarily on the planning and budget committee, and it tends to be for a very good reason. In fact, there was a reason why I wasn't on it for a very long time, because I'm easily confused. But I will say that I wonder about the wisdom of asking a bunch of folks that have less interest in the ins and outs of the budget about what that structure should look like before even taking it to PBC. But I don't know. I just wanted that to be out there, and maybe you can just hang out there. I'm not sure. I don't necessarily need a response. I understand what you're getting at. I just wanted to share my concern.
Yeah.
Okay, well, duly noted. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I do think any of the focus groups could try to get to the budget committee folks that are at the various colleges to make sure they are participating, and certainly PBC to participate in those focus groups. I think that oftentimes we don't hear from the college's budget committee, so I'd encourage you to to reach out to them as well, Dr. Jones. My question has more to do with again, how are we folding in the resource allocation model, and I am saying it right, the resource allocation model, into this budget development that we in essence start in January, but hopefully in the future we can have 2-year ones or something. But the whole point is, to make sure that it's integrated, and then whatever the revisions are in terms of the allocation, and I am certain that everybody has seen the modeling for this, but of course this is going to go live, right? And the allocations that get provided to by July to the various colleges and to the district offices are going to be what, you know, different or similar or whatever it is, but the intention is to utilize those the resource allocation. So I just want people to get a heads up of what's coming down this spring.
I think one of the things that I would say in response to that, Donald, is this. I think that there is a lot more clarity around the revenue side of things, and that's really largely driven by the state process and how we receive funding from the state. Now, our resource allocation model indicates very, very clearly, I think, how those revenues are going to follow the revenue centers, and that's each of the colleges. But what we don't have as clear an understanding, which is exactly what we need to be working on, is determining what should be the expense budgeting process. I mean, how do we determine how we're going to use those revenues once they are in the quote unquote coffers of the revenue centers? That's what's been less clearly defined and articulated. And so that's what we need to develop. And so what Chancellor Jackson has indicating that she has seen from her experience and somewhat from mine is more of a process that is college centric, that comes up to the district and we validate the revenues. The expenses seem to make sense, but the expenses, what are the priorities of the campuses and things like that, that's being largely driven by campus processes and campus stakeholders. And it has to align with the strategic and educational plans of the colleges, and then the district sort of pulls all that stuff together, and to make sure that there's alignment and be an opportunity for us to have critical conversations about where we can use our resources in a more collaborative way to garner the maximum amount of benefits, and that the strategies that we're using dovetail nicely with one another, and that's not creating unnecessary competition where we're not going to be benefited by that. So it's to allow for some of those kinds of things, I think would be what I would hope for us to arrive at when we're done sometime, probably June or July or August timeframe next year. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you. Your last kind of closing string of comments there is in line with the comment that I'm about to make, and that is, as we continue, Donald asked the question, so will we use the new resource allocation model? And it just makes me think of how it is that we either need to agree which parts of our historical budget development process we will keep and which need to be revised. An example, and I know I've made this comment here at BCC for quite a few months now, is that perhaps we need to shift the conversation solely from FTES targets and FTEF allocation. And if what this new RAM is going to say, Berkeley City College, you get $1,000 to run your college, then we as a college, through our process, understand what our fixed costs are, right? So our obligations to our employees, to that which we need to operate the college. And so including one of which might be the kind of schedule that we might staff with not just general funds, but other funding sources. And that is a different conversation, because I feel like coming into it, it's always been like what has been given to the colleges in terms of an FTEF allocation. And so it's this misleading concept that has been completely well flushed out. And I think what we're learning is that it has not, right? So, so that is just something that I would hope the PBC would consider in conversations, is how do we remove the focal of it being FTES targets and FTEF allocation, and rather resource allocation to the colleges or parts of our district, right, our entities, and then how do we meet our contractual obligations, our legislative obligations, and do that through our local development processes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree, Angelica. I think the thing is this: essentially, the FTES targets, as a word to speak, we need to understand what we've done in the past and what we are likely to do in terms of projecting what our revenues are going to be. And that's something that we have to do together. I need to understand what each college thinks they can do in terms of producing FTS and the other components of the student-centered funding formula. And so we have to spend some time talking about and strategizing what is a reasonable revenue projection for the district. And with that, there are going to be components of that overall revenue projections that are revenues that we anticipate are going to be generated by Berkeley City College. There's going to be another percentage of those overall revenues that we anticipate are going to be produced by Merritt College. And then there's another set that's by the other two colleges and so forth. And then once we have a reasonable projection of revenues by each of the revenue centers, then it'll be up to them to determine from a prioritization and institutional effectiveness parameters, how to allocate those resources to maximum benefit among their campus stakeholders, and to achieve those results that they have prioritized, informed by their program review processes, their shared governance conversations, and the like. That's what we have to define in a more granular level, but those are absolutely components of the process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the conversations. And I know that CM has been working with the colleges and looking at their expenses and so on. So I hope that we could get more dialogues on this as we move forward. And I know everybody is committed to that. Thank you very much on the budget side. What's next on the agenda, Brand?
Donald, can you hear me?
Yes.
I also want to share that CM couldn't join us, but he invited Beth Gomez from his organization to join us. And so I'm not sure if she had something to share, but she's here.
Hey,
Okay.
Beth, good to see you.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you? Good.
Right.
Hi, Rudy. You're the other face that I know.
Beth Gomez, how are you?
I'm good. But yes, we are looking at all the expenditures right now. Actually, I'm assisting CM in doing all of that. So we're working on this right now. So we should be able to help you identify some of those metrics as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, and hopefully we can have those conversations, and I think it's going to be a very interesting exercise to see, so we can have this all integrated by the time of the end of the year. I don't know what kind of timeline everybody has, but the sooner we have a timeline outlined, and how this, within this context of the budget development, as well as the resource allocation model, as well as the expenses that have been identified and are looking at, that somehow we have these things all coming together in a timeline that allows all of us to participate and have, have those discussions. So, and I know we have to have them this year, or else everything is going to occur without having that dialogue. So I do hope that that within PBC, PGC, as well as the colleges, budget committees and the college councils or roundtables or so on are going to participate. And then through Dr. Jones's focus groups and so on, the more we have engaged in this process, I think the more beneficial it'd be. So thank you very much, Beth, for saying that. Brandy, is Beth going to be doing a presentation at all, or is she just here to make those few comments?
I'm actually observing, if you don't mind, and then just taking down some notes. So, but along the way, if you have any questions for me, just let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth. Brandy, what's next on our agenda?
Okay, next on our agenda is are the committee reports and breakout sessions.